Everybody there?
Not yet. We'll find
Yeah, I
out.
have to put that in the shanties one.
Oh, sure. Me too, but smell though.
Hello, Shavua Tov.
Hi.
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 Okay. Hi. How are you?
You have your land legs back?
What happened to your tan? You still have it on your forehead. Are you smearing in something?
I'm in the desert. We walked 4 miles today in the sun.
Oh, it must have been a pleasure. Tomorrow's supposed to be 85 or higher here in LA. I wonder what it's going to be in the desert.
It's gonna be
Well, today was very nice. It was breezy and it was just
yeah, it
the
was a
right
good
time to
win.
go.
That's
To
The
go.
winds were pretty heavy here too.
Yeah,
Oh,
tomorrow's gonna be 230 degrees. 84, 84.
very
Same.
good.
Yeah.
Is that on the Kelvin scale?
Yeah. I remember Kelvin. He owes me $10. Absolute zero. That was my grade point average. Absolute zero.
Yeah.
You know David
Zero
Katzen,
times
right?
zero is zero, right?
You know David Katzen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he took a genetics class with me. We're together in the same class. And when we had the final exam, I'm sitting next to him and I hear him muttering through the test, oh my God, oh my, So he's kvetching the whole time. So a week later, they post the grades. He got an A, I got a C. What are you kvetching about the whole time? Faked me out. Uh,
It made a big difference in life, right? Yeah.
yeah, I like calculus.
Oh, yeah. Physics was my my hardest course
Oh,
to
really? I should do
master.
well in physics. I don't know. It was a fluke.
Yeah.
I was just eating something.
Okay.
But when did your beard get gray?
Mario, what was your best class in school? What'd you do well in? Spanish?
In school,
Yeah.
I did everything well.
Oh, that's good. I'm sure.
Really, really.
If they would have had computers, you would have been like the Bill Gates.
Hmm? Yeah, that's true.
When did you learn computers?
What?
Were you in Cleveland already? Or
Yeah.
London? In England? Yeah.
Not in England, in
Oh,
Cleveland.
Cleveland. Hi, Faggy. Wave to Faggy.
Oh, hi, Fakey.
Walter, Eric
Yeah,
misses you. Eric misses you.
I miss him too. What can I say? His wife is not doing so well, so he couldn't go to Israel. Lucky he didn't go.
Oh, I saw her in show today. They're in show.
Who is that?
Oh, you
Eric's
mean
wife.
still? Oh, okay. I don't know. She needs something
Yeah.
on the shoulder or something.
Oh, no, she looked okay.
Yeah.
Well, you won't see from the shoulder.
He said you're afraid to play him.
I am. It's true. That's the truth.
What of everybody?
So,
Okay. Um, we'll, we're going to start Sefer Ezra today, Pasuk Aleph.
Just remember that he doesn't get
what's
into
that?
this.
Let's read we're going to learn the first, everyone look in your Nevi'im, we're going to learn the Rashi together. It says, Uvishnas achas lekoresh melech paras. The first year of Cyrus, the king of Persia. Lichlos dvar Hashem mipir miyahu. This is the conclusion of the word of Hashem as he spoke to Yirmiyahu Navi. He'ir Adonai et ruach Koresh melech Paras. Hashem aroused the goodwill of Cyrus, the king of Persia. Vayaver kol b'chol machuto. He made an oral declaration, v'kam b'michtav le'mor. And he sent a letter. Now, let's learn Rashi. Bishnas achas lekoresh melech Paras. Seder sefer zeh, sidur umushach achar sefer Daniel. This sefer belongs after Sefer Daniel, Kemufurish Baba Basra. As we learned last week, in Baba Basra, it lists the Sforim in order, and Sefer Ezra appeared after Sefer Daniel. Now, we're going to see machloikas with that in a minute, but let's just see how Rashi learns. He says the words that are mentioned in Sefer Daniel fit here. Shenemar ben Daniel, it said in Daniel, Perak Tes, Bishnas Achas Lamalcho. In the first year of Cyrus's reign, Ani Daniel binosi basforim, I Daniel mispar shonim ashrayad var Hashem al Yirmiyahu Navi. I calculated how many years that Yirmiyahu Navi had said Lamalos Lechavas Yushalayim Shivim Shana, to fulfill 70 years of destruction after Yerushalayim's destruction. We are now 70 years after that. And that parsha in Sefer Daniel, he goes through the Churban, how long they stayed in Bavel. He mentioned the sins of the Jewish people that led to the Golus. Says Rashi, Utchilas Seder Sefer Zeh Kachu. And it fits into the beginning of our Sefer, Shala'achar Shenerag Belshazzar. The night of the party when Belshazzar brought out the Kelim, and there was a handwriting on the wall, and they called Daniel to interpret it. And he said, you're going to die tonight, and he was killed that night. Molach Daryavish Hamadi, Darius the Mede took over from Belshazzar. Shenemar, V'Daryavish Madog Kibel Malchuta. Darius the Mede became the king. Ulachar Misas Daryavish, he only ruled for 1 year. Molach Zeh Koresh Melech Paras. That's when Koresh took the reign. Uvishnas Achas L'Mochel Hushlumu Shivim Shana Lifkidas Golus Bavel Miyom Shagala Lo Yokim. So remember, the exile from Yerushalayim took place in 2 stages. There was Golus Yoyakim that took place 18 years prior to when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. This year of Cyrus's ascension to the Malchus was 70 years after Golus Yoyakim. Shenemar lefi Mlos leBavel Shivim Shana Ef Kodeschem. A Pekida, Ef Kodeschem means I'm going to remember you. And Shechazru Yisrael Megolus Bavel Eretz Yisrael. Cyrus is going to declare the permission for the Jewish people to make Aliyah from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. And when the Jews arrive, as we're going to see, they laid the foundations for the Beis HaMikdash. However, Tsari Yehuda Binyamin, the enemies of Judah and Benjamin, Hilshinu Aleim L'Korsh Melech Paras. Word was sent back to Persia, to Cyrus, that the Jewish people are rebelling. Cyrus gave an order to stop building the Beis HaMikdash. V'hayu Yisrael b'telim shelo livnos habayis kol malchus Koresh. So the work to build the Beis HaMikdash was stopped throughout Koresh's reign. And who came after? U'malchus Achashverosh shemolach achra. Achashverosh, who ruled after Cyrus, also, there was no building of the Beis HaMikdash. Remember, when we learned in Esther, Ad Chatzia Malchus V'Seyas, that he asked Esther, ask anything you want, and I will give you everything, even up to the half of the kingdom. And remember, we learned the Meforshim that said that Achashverosh would not give in to, if Esther had asked for them to get permission to rebuild the Beis Mikdash, he wouldn't have given it. Ad shnash shtayim lemalchus Daryavish ben Achashverosh melech Poros, shehu Daryavish ben Esther. Esther and Achashverosh had a son, Darius. And in the second year of Daryavish's rule, uvishnash shtayim lemalchus, so he's chilu livnos Beis Mikdash. Ad asher hu shlomo bayis. And then they actually started to build the Beis Mikdash until it was finished. Umishana achas lekorach, Koresh, ad shnat shtayim leDaryavish ben Achashverosh melech Poros, from the time of this first year of Koresh's reign until this second year of Darius ben Achashverosh reign, Shivnivne b'yaz hayushmona esrei was 18 years. That's, remember we said, 18 years prior to Tzidkiyahu's taking prisoner and the destruction of the Beis Mikdash of on Tisha B'Av, Yoakim had been taken. So now 18 years later, the rebuilding of the Beis Mikdash with Darius, the son of Achashverosh, occurs now 70 years after the Churban itself. L'malos l'charvos Yushalayim shivim shana. Now it actually mentions the destruction of Yerushalayim. This is now 70 years after Tzidkiyahu's exile. Again, it points out that there were 18 years between those times. Now, back to our pasuk, which is the first year of Cyrus's reign, was 70 years after the exile of Yoakim, Shagol Yisrael above, when they first were taken, the first group of people, including Daniel, to Babylonia. Uvekach niskaima mikra, that's how Yirmiyahu's prophecy was fulfilled. Shenemar kilafila malos lebavel shivim shana efkodeschem. I will remember you, zu apkida. Not necessarily that they would have the right to rebuild the Beis Mikdash, but it's a start. Cyrus gave them a permission to make Aliyah Shechaz Yisrael ad Masam. They came back. Ubana Yisod ben Yisabais. They built the foundations. Even though it wasn't finished now. 52 years from when Tzidkiyahu was taken prisoner and the temple destroyed until Cyrus initially let them go back. And then Shmona Esrei Shana Lachar Shana Achas LeKoresh, there's another 18 years. Shishna Shtayim LeDaryavish Melech Poros Hushlumu Shivim Shana Charvetz Roim. This is 7 years after the mamish, the destruction of the temple. Migol Tzidkiyahu Shenech Rabayis at Shashtayim LeDaryavish at Kli Yisrael Binyan Bayis of Gumru. And Rashi says, V'chein Mochiach B'Seder Olam. We have a chronology written by Tanoim called Seder Olam. So Rashi says this order that he just went through carefully is mentioned in Seder Olam. So that's an important source, and it's mentioned in Besechta Megillah, Daf Yud Aleph, U'v'Sefer Zeh Kashabarti. So we see, according to Rashi, Ezra is a continuation of Daniel. The Ramban and the Malbim differ with Rashi, and they say that Ezra is linked with Divrei Hayomim. If you look at the last two sentences of Divrei Hayomim, and this first sentence in Ezra is exactly the same. Now, the order of the Sforim in Baba Basra, Ezra is before Divrei Hayomim, like Rashi learns. But anyways, I wanted to point out that there's a machlokas. And could be that what Rashi means, that even though Sefer Daniel does not follow immediately after the book Sefer Ezra doesn't follow immediately after Daniel, they're linked thematically, right? Because Ezra is recounting the fulfillment of Yirmiyahu's prophecy through Cyrus, allowing them to go back. And Baba Basra places Esther between Daniel and Ezra, because Achashverosh and the Purim story precede Daryavish Hasheni, which is described later in the book of Ezra. So it just fulfilled how we are learning, how we decided to study Ezra after we studied Sefer Esther. Many Meforshim point out that the word Koresh are the same letters as the word kosher, implying that Cyrus was considered a kosher king. And that the Ibn Ezra says he was given that name because he had virtuous behavior towards the Jewish people. The pasuk that says Lichlos Dvar Hashem Yipir Yirmiyahu, that's why Rashi goes through very carefully how did the 70 years, the conclusion, work? That it's 70 years from Yoakim, and it's different from the 70 years of when Tzidkiyahu was taken prisoner. Just to go over, Nebuchadnezzar ruled for 43 years. Evil Moradach reigned for 22 years after that. So that's 43 plus 22, that's 65. And then Belshazzar ruled for 3 years. Then Darius ruled for 1 year. And then we said Cyrus ruled for 1 year. So that brings us to 70.
And the sister Vash is the sister of.
The Malbim cites Josephus, right, the Roman historian, that when Cyrus learned that Daniel shows up and reads the writing on the wall and predicts that Belshazzar is not going to outlive the night and he's killed that night, he sort of vowed to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. That's what it means that this spirit of Hashem arose in Koresh. The Malbim points out that it wasn't enough to declare a proclamation, they had to write it down. Remember, we learned in Esther that a written decree of the king cannot be rescinded. So they wrote it to make sure that it wouldn't be reversed, meaning the permission that Cyrus is going to give that Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash be rebuilt, that it should be written down by the Persian king. It was very important. As Rashi pointed out, eventually there were enemies of the Jewish people who slandered the Jewish people, and he ordered the construction to stop. And only 18 years later, Darius II, who was the son of Achashverosh and Esther, allowed it to because they found a copy of this written proclamation of Cyrus, that because Cyrus had written it down, they could justify rebuilding it. What was the slander that the enemies did? Because they said that the Jewish people were fortifying the entire city with walls and that they were planning a rebellion. And the king accepted that slander because that part was unauthorized. Let me just see one more safer before we move on. No. First of all, people were great commentaries were wowed that 100 years prior, Yeshayahu Navi predicted that a person named Koresh is going to come to allow Klal Yisrael to rebuild. And eventually somebody named Koresh came. Also in Malachim, Hinei ben nolad lebeis David Yoshiyahu shmo. They also predicted that someone was going to be born Yoshiyahu, and eventually was born. So that was 300 years before Yoshiyahu was. So that's an Am Skula. That the Nevi'im actually predicted names of people that would come. Now, Noach gave a bracha to his sons. It says, Yaft Elokim liyefes v'yishkon ba'olei shem. So Afagav, the Gemara says, Afagav the Yaft Elokim liyefes, that even though Bayis Sheni is going to be built from the Persians, the Persians come directly from Yefes. Ein Ashchina Shora Ela B'olei Shem. There was more Shechina in the Beis HaMikdash that Shlomo HaMelech built than there was in Bayis Sheni, because we know that we're going to learn that Bayis Sheni was lacking many of the miraculous things that existed in Bayis Rishon. But you can see it was predicted that the Persians would have a connection to the building of the Beis HaMikdash. In Tanit V'Eliyahu says, why was Koresh Zoiche that he would be the Shaliach, that because it says, Hu bocha u'mitanech b'shah she'chrivu akam es Beis HaMikdash. He was distraught when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. So the Shloh brings al derech hasod, Nikreit Eretz Canaan af la'achar shaya shel Yisrael, nishara dan bekocho shel Canaan af beit sheyosh v'Yisrael aleh. Eretz Canaan continued to be called Canaan even when the Jewish people dwelled there. Lo yatsu mikocho shel Canaan ad amud bayis sheni la'achar kama shanim. They only started being called Yisrael and not Canaan only when Bayis Sheni was built. V'zeh soda davar lefi ma shekibalnu b'shem Arizal, ki Koresh melech parash asher tziva livnos Beis HaMikdash, va'az nisyashva Eretz Yisrael shenis. The Jewish land was resettled after Koresh, and bekocho shel poras hayataku Canaan, ki kain nizgagel achar kach be'evid Kanani. Tevi, Eved Knani, Avda Sharab Gamliel haya Gilgul Shel Koresh. Those of us who know Daf Yomi, Rabbi Gamliel had a famous Eved Knani of, and the Shloh says he was the Gilgul of Koresh. She'omer Rav Gamliel al Tevi Avdo Kosher haya, Oisios Koresh. That Tevi even was Eved Knani, he was a kosher dika person, which are the letters of Koresh. And Yeshayahu in Perak Memei says, Ko amar Hashem l'mshicho l'koresh. So he already predicted hundreds of years before. The word Koresh in Persian is dog. Shehu kelev b'loshen Parsi. Sheyonak v'nizgagel mikalbo. He grew up in the wilderness and was nursed by a dog. Now, why would the Persians call their king in the name of a dog? So they bring a Maisadan, Tritnis Melech Paras Loyalo Elabas Achas. Persian king only had one daughter, Yereshus Malchusa, who's going to become the queen. The Ava Sar Misara Taharlo. She fell in love with one of the officers, became pregnant. Ukashmoa via Haragas Asar. The king heard and killed that officer. The Samet Bito B'Masar and put this daughter in a prison. And when the daughter gave birth, the king sent the child through a messenger to the desert. Vasaken v'nicheu sham, and this child was left there. Vayiman Hashem kalba achas v'niko. And Hashem made a dog show up, and it kept this child alive. Vayigdal hayelev v'nasa ben chayil, became a soldier. Vayisfoy lav anashim reikim v'yoelem lasar, became the general. U'shmuel melech kavatz anashim rabim v'shlach l'hargo. He became Koresh. So it's a myth, it's a legend, but it's brought by Chazal. Darius the Mede only had one daughter, and he gave that daughter to Koresh. So Koresh was the son-in-law of Darius, who died, and that made Koresh the king. Okay. Pasuk Beis. Ko amar Hashem. Excuse me. Ko amar Koresh melech Parah. So spake Koresh. Kol mamlechos haaretz. Nasan li Hashem Elokei Hashemayim. All of the nations of the world, the God of heavens, have given to me. V'hu pakad alai livnos lo bayis. He has commanded me to build him a bayis, b'Yushalayim asher b'Yehuda, in Jerusalem that is in Judea. Chazal say the fact that Hashem called upon a Persian king to cause a return to Shalim, you could see that there was Jewish unworthiness in the eyes of God. A more deserving generation would have merited a return to the land free from alien domination. It says in Brachos 41, Ezra's generation was destined for redemption as miraculous as that of Yoshua, when the greatly outnumbered Jewish army conquered Eretz Yisrael in a series of miraculous victories. But their chatoim, their misdeeds, prevailed. And therefore, this unworthiness of the Jewish people made the return to Tzion contingent upon Cyrus's permission. And then there was domination of Cyrus's successors, Achashverosh, Daryavesh. Both Ibn Ezra and the Malbim note that he refers to Hashem as Oher Shamayim, not as heaven and earth. He, as we've spoken many times before, he was a deist. He had an erroneous belief that Hashem does not intervene in earthly affairs, but relegates the dominion over earth to man, the deists. They agreed that Hashem created the world, but then he withdrew from the world. We've spoken before, Thomas Jefferson, of course, Spinoza, Albert Einstein, all the scientists, they followed this Spinozan concept that there were laws of nature that were put, but Hashem, there's no Hashgacha Pratis. And that was and Cyrus had this concept. So Hashem is in Shemayim, but he's not on earth. Now there's machlokas in Yuma 9 whether the Shechina actually was in Bayesheni or not. According to Rabbi Yochanan, there was no Shechina in Bayesheni, or certainly not on the level that it was in the first. Why? Because it was built by the efforts of these Persian kings, as opposed to the first Bais, which was built only by Shlomo Melech. Reish Lakish says, different than Rabbi Yochanan, that the reason the Shechina didn't come to Bayesheni because the entire nation did not return to Babylon. Only 42,360 came back, which was a very small minority. So when we talk about all the various miracles that were not present in Bayesheni, a lot of that is because the Bayis was given permission to rebuild by a Persian king, and it wasn't a completely Jewish affair. The whole return of Bayesheni is you notice it's called a Pekida. It's not called Geula. A Pekida is God remembered us, but it's not final Geula. We know Bayis Sheni was destroyed. Also Gimel. Mi bachem mikol amo, anyone among you. He just wasn't talking to the Jews. He was saying anyone among you. Yehi Elohavimo. His God should be with him. V'ya'al Yushalayim asher b'Yehuda. You may go up to Jerusalem, that it's in Judea. V'yiven es beis Hashem lokei Yisrael, and participate in the building of the bayis to Hashem. Hu Elohim asher b'Yushalayim, who is the God in Jerusalem. So Cyrus's words were addressed even to the non-Jews. Now, only the Jews were going to be qualified to actually perform the work of construction, but he basically obligated the Gentiles to share in the building. They were to help send the Jews to Yerushalayim. We're going to see more detail in that. Ibn Ezra says that only those who God had blessed with wealth should go up to Yerushalayim. And he was urging emigration for those Jews wealthy enough to afford the trip. You notice this is the first time that we see the concept of aliyah, that because of Kedushas Eretz Yisrael, going to Israel is described as going up. I mean, we have Chazal that say that the Beis HaMikdash was higher than Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim was higher than other places in Eretz Yisrael. And Eretz Yisrael is higher than other lands. Now, we know from a geography point of view, that's not so. You have Mount Everest is in the Himalayas, is the highest place. But we're talking about spirituality, that Hashem's eyes are on the land. We're going to see later on that there was a lot of economic considerations. A lot of Jewish goldsmiths and silversmiths had made aliyah because they needed those craftsmen to build the Beis HaMikdash. So later on in time, he's going to send a decree that any Jews who had not yet crossed the Euphrates has to stay in Babylon. Anyone who has already been beyond the Euphrates can stay in Yerushalayim, because it was going to affect his local economy. It wasn't just, because of the enemies of Yehuda ben Yamin that were slandering. It was his own private economy that he needed. There's another issue that some of you asked me, because why so few people? The 42,360. That's the number that the Navi is going to give us. Why so little? The Ramban suggests that it was only to those Babylonian exiles who either they or their ancestors had lived in the kingdom of Judea prior to the Golus, only they were allowed to go back. But if you were from the Aseret HaShvatim, who had been exiled earlier, they did not have the permission. So there were, at that time, other members of the 10 Shvatim that remained, but they were not given permission to go up. That's how the Ramban learns. You notice Cyrus himself is not going up personally. He's telling people to go. The Gemara in Megillah 12a censors Koresh that he himself didn't labor personally for the restoration of the temple. He just said, because the Gemara there mentions that Hashem sustained Koresh, his right arm, and he didn't, but he didn't do personal effort. But he was rewarded because the Medrash says that Nebuchadnezzar had amassed an immense fortune during the course of his conquests. And he buried it in the waters of the Euphrates. After Cyrus issues this decree that they can go up, Hashem showed him where this treasure was, and he became very wealthy. That's brought in Esther Rabbah. The Malbim points out that this Bayis Sheni is going to be the Bayis only for the Jewish people. But in the future, it's going to be a house of worship for all of mankind. As it says in Yeshayahu. When it says, Hu Elokim Asher B'Yushalayim, so Rashi and Ibn Ezra are pointing out that he's not describing where God is, he's describing where the location of the temple is. It means to build the temple of Hashem, and he is, right, which is in Yerushalayim, but he is Hashem, which is like in a parentheses. The Mitzudos learn differently. They say that that Koresh was referring to the Hashem who's only in Yerushalayim, implying that even though it has been destroyed, Hashem doesn't abandon it. And again, the Malbim points out that this is Cyrus's understanding of the divine. He thought perhaps the Shekhinah or the divine providence only has Shlit in Yerushalayim. The rest of the world is under the muzzle of the Kochavim. And Koheles Rabbah says that when it says his talk begins as foolishness, it's referring to this statement of Koresh, he is the God who is in Jerusalem. Only a fool would fail to observe there's a universal evidence of the hand of providence and say that Hashem's power is limited only to Yerushalayim. So brachas daled amid aleph. Ad yavoram cha Hashem, ad yavoram zu kanisa. Pasuk in Shir in Az Yashir. Ad yavoram cha Hashem zu bi'arishoina. The ad yavoram cha Hashem refers to Klal Yisrael coming in with Yoshua. Ad yavoram zu kanisa zu bi'ashnia. This is the second coming to Eretz Yisrael. Mikan amru chachamim ru'uim ayu Yisrael la'asos lehem neis b'mei Ezra. Like I said before, Klal Yisrael should have had nisim during the time of Ezra, like was done by Yoshua. Ela shagor machet. What kind of Rashi says in Sota, shagorim chatam shel Yisrael b'mei Bais Rishon. It's all the sins they did during Bais Rishon. The nigzar aleim. The Gzeira that they would only be able to go back to Yerushalayim with permission by a gentle king was a Gzeira that was given to them because of their sins in Bais Rishon. The Maharsha learns differently. The Maharsha says that the Chet, that the reason they didn't have Nisim was because all of them didn't come up, that only a few of them came up. Others say that the Chet was intermarriage, that they mixed with the Goyim and they married foreign women. We're going to see later on that Ezra had to do a whole process of separating the Goyish women. Some say that Bayis Sheni could have been the last Bayis. It would not have been destroyed. When? If Koresh by himself would have come up and participated and brought all the Jews, everybody to come. Because he had the power to do it. They were all under his thing. So that's a very powerful statement. Pasuk Dalet. V'chol anishar mikolam kamot asher hu gar sham. He's speaking to those who are not going to make aliyah. Yinasu anshe makomo. They should help those that are going to make aliyah. The kesef, the zahav, silver, gold, v'chusha v'meima, with other assets and animals, iman and davala beit elohim asher b'shalayim, and give contributions to the building of the bayis. So Rashi says any Jew who's forced to remain behind because of his poverty. And when it says Anshe Makomo, that refers to the Gentile inhabitants. And Yinasu Bekesav Uvizov, that was a command. That's a good fundraiser. The king. It's not a question of, do you want to do it? He forced them to do it. And that allowed even the poor Jews to make aliyah. The Malbim wants to say even there was a nuance to raise their spirit. If they don't have the self-insurance for the bold project, they should lift their spirits and give them koiches, spiritual koiches to go. Just like in the Mishkan, which we're reading now, the Ramban says, these were slaves in Egypt. How did they all of a sudden become goldsmiths and silversmiths in the desert? They were untutored and unskilled. But that's the Nesias Libo. That was a Siyata Dishmaya, that they were given confidence and they volunteered and they did exquisite artistry in the Mishkan and the Midbar. And the same thing happened now in the time of Koresh. The Gemara in Sanhedrin Tzadik Tesom and Beit says, "Kolamasat chaver ledvar mitzvah mala kosov kilo asa." Somebody who helps somebody do a mitzvah, it's as if you did the mitzvah. Because it says, "Umatcha asher kisa bos hayor." Moshe is thanked for the mata that he struck the yor with. What v'chi Moshe yikav v'lo Aaron yikav? Aaron struck the Nile, not Moshe. When Moshe gave Aaron the mat and helped him do it, it's considered as if he did it. So this help that's being given to those that are making aliyah at this time is a wonderful thing. Pasuk Hey. Vayakumu Roshei Avot Liyuda V'Yamin. The heads of the tribes and the families of Judah and Benjamin, V'Kohanim V'Alvim, L'chol He'ir Elohim et Rucho. Hashem raised up their spirit. La'alot livnot et Beit Adonai Asher B'Yushalayim. To go up and make aliyah and to build the Beis Hamikdash in Jerusalem. And this response is the Medrash and Shir Hashirim, that it's a source of Jewish merit that they responded. That it was only the Jews who responded, and the Gentiles, even though he offered the Gentiles to go, it was only the Jews that responded. Tosfos and Erechin 32a state that there were members of all 12 tribes that went up to the land of Israel. Not the whole Shvatim, but there were designated people from each. But the predominant population was Yehuda, Binyamin, and Levi. They were the majority of the people who returned. And we know the numbers. We're going to see it in Perek Beis. The Kohanim, Leviim, the Judeans and Benjamites were 29,000. All the others added up to 13,000. So there were others. The Ramban says in Sefer HaGeula, not like that. Not like Tosfos. That the 10 tribes remained in the Golah, except for a few people from Ephraim and Manasseh, who came back and they resided in areas of Yehuda and Binyamin. And that's because Cyrus's permission was limited to those who had previously inhabited there. Interestingly, the Ramban says that they didn't return because they had sworn an oath that the redemption not be unduly hastened. They had taken an oath, the Shir Hashem Rabbah says, not to come back to the Holy Land without divinely revealed authorization, because they took an oath not to rebel against the nations. The Babylonian exiles, not the Asar Shvatim, were released from that oath because Yirmiyahu had prophesied they're going to come back after 70 years. But the 10 tribes had been taken captive 100 years before the Babylonians were taken. They were not included in that. So they remained, so it's like they were from Eden. Who does this sound like? It sounds like Satmar, right? The whole anti-Zionists there were oaths in the end of the Gemara in Ksubas, the Shalosh Shvuos, that it relates to the same thing. What is this thing about waiting for Mashiach? It's this oath not to rebel unless there's divine authority. So that's a reason given by the Ramban in Sefer HaGeula that the 10 tribes did not come up. And end up with them, they end up being lost to history. When the pasuk says "L'chol he'ir Elohim es ruchol lalos livnos," Hashem assists those after independent human endeavor has begun. So, and you can overcome insurmountable obstacles with siyata d'shmaya, but you have to start. That's why the elders of Yehuda and Binyamin rose spontaneously. Then Hashem gave them a spark of divine inspiration to go up and build. So you can see the early Zionists, they also thought this concept of we have to go up and start the process. Rav Kook, that's why he saw so much, he saw that they were part of the messianic process as well, even though they were secular. But they were inspired to go up and start the process. By the way, you notice Ezra does not respond to Cyrus's call. He remains in Bavel until they start building the bias under, once Daryavish Hasheni, that's going to start in chapter 7. He was a Talmud of the Gadol Ador Baruch ben Neriah. He would not leave his teacher as long as Baruch ben Neriah still lived. From here, the rabbis learn the mitzvah of studying Torah is greater than even building the Beis HaMikdash. It's Megillah 16b. Why didn't Baruch ben Neriah go up? He was old and infirm and could not withstand the rigors of the journey. So it says in Shir Hashirim Rabbah. The Ruach Chaim by Reb Chaim Velazar connects this spirit of Aliyah to the Asara Nisyonos Nisnas Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was told Lech Lecha, and he also went from a strange land. He went to Eretz Yisrael. Every people in all generations derive this spirit of Aliyah from to Eretz Yisrael from Avram Avinu. Pasuk Vav. V'chol svivoseim chizku bideyem. Those Gentiles who lived around them strengthened their hand. B'chlei chesef, b'zov, b'rechush v'meim of migdonos. With silver and gold and rechush, valuables, animals, precious goods. Levada kol isnadev. Besides everything that was contributed to build the Beis Hamikdash. They needed animals for transport. The Migdonos, the Ralbag, and the Metzudah say are clothing, food, and jewels. And this is all given to the Jews. This is besides the contributions given for the construction of the Beis Hamikdash. This is just to finance the trip to go to Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara in Erchin 5b says that contributions for establishment of the temple may not be accepted from non-Jewish sources. We see this because in Ezra, Perek Daled, the Zakanim did not allow the Shomronim to participate in the building of the temple. So there seems to be a contradiction. Here, all of this donations given by Gentiles is being praised. So Tosfos there justifies by pointing to, remember, Yeshayahu in 44 extolled Koresh as the builder of the city of Jerusalem and the restorer of the temple. So you could accept gifts from Koresh because it was the fulfillment of the stated will of heaven given by one of his Nevi'im, the Navi Shiur. So that steer is answered. Pasuk Zayin. Ve'amelech Koresh hotzias klei beis Yehuda. There were kelim asher hotzi Nebuchadnezzar Yerushalayim. This refers to the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash that Nebuchadnezzar had removed from Yerushalayim. Koresh took these kelim that had been stored, vayitneim beveis Elohav. Nebuchadnezzar had put it in his temples to the foreign gods. But Vayotziem Koresh Melech Paras ad Yad Misradas Agizbar. Koresh had them removed by we'll see the treasurer Mitradat, Vaisperem L'Shesh Batzar, Hanasil Yoda, the prince of Judah, he counted them out to Shesh Batzar. Now, Yirmiyahu had also predicted that all the kelim that remain shall be taken to Bavel. They will remain there. I will remember them and bring them back to Yerushalayim. In 33:26, it says he banished Yehoiakim, brought Daniel and the other Jews initially to Bavel, and some of the vessels were brought. The next year, he brought Yehoiakim with other vessels. And 11 years later, on the 9th of Av, he destroyed the temple and brought the remaining vessels with King Tzidkiyahu. So according to Rashi and Radak, the vessels that were brought to Bavel in the third exile, the ones that were brought when Melech Tzidkiyahu and the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, that's what Koresh returned. Who is Sheshbatzar? By the way, you notice Koresh did it via his treasurer and then to Sheshbatzar. Didn't go directly from a pagan temple to the Beis HaMikdash. That would be unseemly for Caleb to do that. So he disassociated the vessels from its source of corruption, put it in his own treasury. And that's like an act of bitul. By if a non-Jew is mevatel something that was used in a pagan ritual, it's now fit for use in temple service. According to the Medrash, and Rashi brings it, Sheshbatzar is Daniel. Because Shesh, he had 6 sorrows, 6 afflictions. What were the 6 afflictions? He was thrown into the den of lions. Hanan, Mishael, Azariah were thrown into the fiery furnace. The lives of Daniel and his companions were menaced because he was threatened that all the wise men of Bavel were going to be killed unless he would interpret their dream. And then portions of the Jewish nation were exiled on 3 separate occasions. That's considered afflictions for Daniel as well. So the Shesh Batzar is Daniel. According to the Ben Ezra Rabag, it's a Persian name of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel is the chief of these exiles that are returning now. With the 43,000, Zerubbabel was a son of Yehuda. He was from Beis David. And he's going to be the leader of the Jewish people until Ezra eventually comes down to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, I'm going to stop here unless somebody has comments, questions. We're going to see that this story of Ezra and Baisheni is very relevant to our times. We mentioned Aliyah, Zionism, the current, right? It's going to be very relevant. We see very similar things that happened at that time versus our time.
In order to build the Beit HaMikdash, we need a melech.
There was no melech at this time.
It's not a condition to build
So
melech and then to build.
So the Rambam says that when Klal Yisrael came into Eretz Yisrael, they had 3 mitzvos: Minui Melech, Mechias HaMolek, Binyan Beis HaMikdash. So to build the Beis HaMikdash at that time, we needed a Melech. We'll see, though, there's no Melech. We didn't even have sovereignty. That's the whole concept of Eretz Yisrael is under the domination of Koresh Melech Paras. The Binyan Beis HaMikdash is Bereshus, a Gentile king. That's why I pointed out that's some of the reasons why the Beis Sheni is a deficient bias. It's not the same level as what Shlomo Melech built. And there was no king. Now, you see, maybe what Zvi is saying, Zerubbabel is at least a descendant of Beis David. And perhaps that's a requirement to fulfill this concept that there has to be a melech involved. We'll see that they needed Sanhedrin, Anshe Knesset Agdola, to establish these are the Mokum of the Azoras, so you need melech, normally melech the Navi. Well, they had that. They had Nevi'im. Maybe Zerubbabel fills that role. And certainly we believe that Bayis Shlishi is going to be built by Melech HaMashiach. We say Melech HaMashiach. So what Tzvi is saying is perhaps correct. Okay, so we will continue. I think we'll continue this parak and probably the next parak next week. Next week, change in time.
Yeah.
We're moving the clock tonight. So we're going to go back to our normal schedule where we learn Navi Sunday night at 8 o'clock. Because
Okay.
what's Shabbos is going to be too late. So that seemed to work for everybody. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Sunday night, 8 o'clock. That'll be our next shiur.
Very good.
Okay.
Okay, have a
Shavua
good
Tov,
week.
everybody.
Shavua Tov.